Hello and welcome to a video titled My Wedding Photography Sony Kit for 2024. I hope you're having a wonderful day. You look great. And you smell good too. Today I'm going to talk to you about my current Sony kit. I'll also be doing a video on my Nikon kit as well as Lindsay's Canon kit. Subscribe, turn the bell on if you're into wedding photography. We do a lot of that on this channel here. Who am I? I'm Taylor Jackson. I photographed over 1,000 weddings all around the world. Wow, right? Look at that B-roll. Okay, this one was a styled shoot, but it was the fastest one that I had available. But I have done a lot of weddings with all the different camera brands. Maybe a quick note on the reason that I use different kits. It's because of YouTube, not because it's recommended. The good news is, regardless of what brand you're with now, there is a great solution for you. The reason that I'm a Sony/Nikon split is because I really love my Nikon ZF and my Z8, but more specifically the old f-mount lenses like my 45 tilt and my 16mm fisheye. I don't really use that one too much, but I also like the 58 and the 24-1.4. But currently, Nikon cameras only record video files to a single card slot, and with about 80% of my wedding days being photo and video days, I feel more comfortable using Sony, which shoots video to both card slots. Canon also records to both card slots, but there's one thing Canon doesn't have, and we're gonna talk about it in a minute, and maybe it's this lens that I have my hand on. Also, I just released 10 new monthly membership slots on the member site. Usually you can just get in for the annual price, but right now there are 10 slots available. If you sign up, you get instant access to my presets, all my courses, and all of my downloads. It's a crazy deal, so get in before it's gone. Let's talk about Sony cameras first, then we'll get to lenses, then we'll get to flashes. I made a video about budget Sony lenses last year, and all of that still holds true. 20mm Tamron 2.8, Sony 35-1.8, Sony 50-1.8, Sony 85-1.8, but now there are some additions like the 24-50 f2.8. It's a very nice option, and paired with an 85mm 1.8, I would be pretty happy to do most wedding days. The Tamron 28-75 f2.8 is also a great option, but I would for sure have a 20mm safety lens in my bag just in case I got into a tight spot where 28mm wasn't wide enough. You might notice that I'm missing any really long lenses, and where you get into problems with this current budget kit that I mentioned is if you're in a big ceremony space and you need a little bit more reach. I will solve this problem in a minute in an expensive and heavy way with the lens that I'm touching in my hand right now. My current Sony cameras, Sony A74, I would still recommend this as Sony's best all-around wedding photography camera. And while I used the Sony A7R Mark V for most of last year, it's expensive and you don't really need the bonus megapixels for weddings in my opinion. 33 megapixels of the Sony A7 IV is great and allows you to go into APS-C crop mode, which I always have set to my C2 button up here. And you still have enough megapixels to deliver a final image from that. Plus, it's at a price point where it is reasonable to get to. It is important to have a backup camera or a backup of a backup camera, and also if you're shooting 2 prime lenses, you're probably gonna want 2 camera bodies on you all day. And with the Sony A7 IV, that's actually possible. With all that said, my main Sony camera going into this year is going to be the Sony A9 Mark III that we're recording this on. It is way too expensive and unnecessary for wedding photographers. As a hybrid photo video camera, it actually gives me something unique, which is 4K 60 uncropped. So that's nice because I'm HD 60p on this still, but the A9 III introduces a new fun challenge. I don't know if it's a problem yet or not, but the base ISO is so high, and when you're shooting in Cinetone, the base ISO is 320, which is fine for photography because you have global shutter and you can go to 1/30,000th of a second if you want. But for video, it does present some new problems or challenges. For hybrid, it's not easy to use ND filters, and I rely a lot on using the lowest ISO possible to keep my shutter speeds down to something reasonable so my footage doesn't look jittery. Over the next few months, I will find out if it's actually fine to be shooting ridiculous shutter speeds with global shutter, if there's some sort of balance with that. I do have a plugin called Real Smart Motion Blur that emulates some motion blur in video. I just really don't want to have to drag it onto every single clip in an entire project. So we'll see together on that one. I also have a full hybrid photo video course available on the member site. So if you get one of those 10 monthly memberships available, you can have instant access to it. And it's my full process for doing both photography and video. It includes editing and everything you need to get started doing video as a wedding photographer. So those are the cameras, Sony A7 IV, Sony A9 Mark III. Next, the lenses. I guess I should preface this with this is what I use and what I've also found myself using the most. There are lenses similar to all the lenses I'm going to mention in third parties, or maybe even Sony makes one. One of the best things about Sony is how many third-party lenses are available. I'm not going to cover every possible one, so if a lens I mention isn't in your budget right now, there's probably a similar focal length and aperture that you can get from either a third party or maybe even from Sony themselves. I will now go through the lenses as I use them on a wedding day. Showing up to the wedding day, for exteriors and getting ready, I'm on this 35mm f1.4 GM pretty much all the time. This is the lens I use the most outside of weddings as well when it comes to travel, commercial, and pretty much anything that I would need what I would consider to be a main lens for. Maybe a disclaimer, I don't do a lot of sports or wildlife subjects that need much longer lenses. I am very happy with this 35. I also shoot this lens at 1.4 pretty much all the time as well. Maybe with the exception of if I'm doing a group shot and there's 8 people in the frame, maybe I'm gonna stop down a little bit in that case. But otherwise, if people's eyes are on the same focus plane, I'm happy to shoot at f1.4 or maybe f2 to give myself a little bit more depth of field in case people are moving around. For details, close focusing of this 35 and a lot of 35s actually gets really close. It's not a true macro, but if you bump into APS-C crop mode or you crop in post, you're probably gonna get pretty close to a macro shot, and it saves you bringing one lens in your bag pretty much for a ring shot, I would say, on a wedding day. And it also forces you to get a little bit more environmental with your ring shot rather than just shooting a product photo of it, which is great, but it's kind of weird. If you actually involve other things and do a little bit of a wider shot that includes the ring, I feel like it's a stronger image overall. The 35mm f1.4 GM is also fairly small and nice to carry ergonomically all day. I like this lens a lot. Could you get by it with 35 f1.8 or an f2? Yeah, for sure. But this is a lens I use all the time, so it's very nice to have the best version of it. Typically, I will be on that lens up until either a first look or a ceremony, and at that point, I will switch to the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8. This is one of my favorite lenses for wedding photographers ever made. The upside is that you can do an entire wedding day for pretty much the entire wedding day with this lens. The downside is it's a bit heavy and it's also expensive. Overall, it's very pleasing to skin tones. It's sharp without being too clinical, which might be a positive or a negative for you. I am personally very happy with it. The 35 to 150 really is the do everything lens. I have a few full wedding days up on the channel that feature this lens pretty extensively, so if it's one you're interested in, maybe check those out. I will use this lens for every ceremony, and at the end of that ceremony, moving into family photos, I'll usually be on it as well. I might switch to my 35 if it's a darker environment, I'm just nervous about my ISO, but most of the time I'm going to be on this 35 to 150. Another great lens for the family photos part of the day would be the 50mm f1.4 GM. For me, I had that lens in my bag for about a year and I really wanted to use it as a main lens, but I just didn't find my brain connecting with the 50mm focal length. I find that I am a lot more comfortable on a 35. The 51.2 is also awesome, but I'd probably lean to the 1.4 for both the cost and weight savings if it's not a lens you're going to be using all the time. I should also mention that I only bring one bag with me. Here it is on the screen, and that's it. So I want to keep my weight down as much as possible so I can be more mobile. And all of this and that fit into that bag with the exception I carry my main camera, and then my second camera's in the bag at the beginning, but it all fits in there. And on that weight and balance of your gear bag topic, this brings me into my next lens. And in my opinion, this is one of the best lenses that Sony has ever made, especially for the cost. Moving into the reception, I'll usually be on my 35 for introductions. And as soon as people start getting on the microphone is when I will switch to this 85mm f1.8. It's lightweight, great quality, and I honestly forget that I'm carrying this around in my bag all day. There's also another option, the GM version of this, which is the 85mm f1.4 GM, and it's incredible, but it's also heavy and a lot more expensive. I will use this 85mm f1.8 for speeches as well as first dances. Typically, I like to stay out of the way as best I can, and this lens allows me to do that. Then in my bag, I also have one bonus lens. And I think it's important to have a wide angle lens in case you get pushed in that corner. If you're using something like a 24 to 70, I would say that that's probably fine. For me, with a 35 prime and the 35 to 150, I need something a little bit wider. So I use this 20mm f1.8G from Sony. It's a great lens that I've recorded most of the YouTube content that I've put on the channel over the past maybe 5 years with. And I honestly love this lens a lot. The problem is that I use it for maybe 5 photos on a wedding day. And for that reason, I would not recommend this one because it's quite expensive. I would recommend the Tamron 20mm f2.8. It's a lot more cost effective, it's small, and it's another one of those lenses that you will forget that you're carrying all day until you're in the corner trying to do a cake cut and you're in the wall. Now into flashes. This section is short. I'm using the Godox V863S. The Godox V1 Pro version, I believe, comes with USB charging in the flash. And as soon as this one breaks, I'm going to be switching to that simply for the fact that I need an additional battery charger with this, which is a bit of a bummer. And I said when it breaks, and that is because I've broken a lot of Godox products. If you do have the budget, Pro Photo for sure makes better quality products that are a lot easier to use, and they also don't break. I also have this orange gel with me here to match incandescent lighting. And then as of today, I just ordered one of the new Godox, the tiny little small triggers. So that's gonna be part of my kit as well this year. Beyond that, in my bag, I have 2 extra batteries if it's an 8-hour wedding day, or maybe 3 batteries and a charger if it's a bit of a longer day. And then I'll also have a light stand in my car in case I do need to use off-camera flash. And that's it. My Sony wedding kit, 4 lenses, 2 camera bodies, Sony A74, Sony A9 Mark III, 20mm f1.8, 35mm 1.4 GM, Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8, the Sony 85mm f1.8, and then the Godox V863S and that tiny trigger. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them in the comments below. Happy to help out where I can. Sony and Tamron do send me most pre-production gear, so I've pretty much used all of it over the past couple of years. So some of it's found its way into my wedding kit, like this, and some of it has not. Happy to talk a little bit more about that if you have a specific question on a lens. If you want to get in on the members website, grab one of those 10 slots available, get instant access to all of my courses and downloads, including my presets, my wedding photography flash courses, pricing, posing, and Book More Weddings, which is my yearly flagship course for photographers. You will not find a better deal on wedding photography education.